go.
We're ready to go.
Okay, we will call the meeting to order, and we'll start with Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And we'll go on to roll call.
Andy Mary,
Yes.
Jim Balzer,
Here.
Mike Boldig,
Here.
Noel Deep,
Here.
Wayne Gagnon,
Here.
Jeannie Long. Jeannie, are you with us? Mary Neufeld,
Here.
Danny Pyatt,
Here.
JD Schrader,
Okay, we will, you want to wait a minute to see if Jeannie comes on?
I believe she's here.
Jeannie, are you here?
Jeannie, we should be able to hear you now. There's somebody here. Sound is working now.
Hello?
There she is.
Okay,
Hi,
Jeannie,
Jeannie.
we just did roll call, so we know you're there.
Okay.
And then we're going to go on to public comment, and we'll start with Pastor Dan.
First, we want to say a great big happy birthday to our district administrator. She turned 39 yesterday. So
Yeah?
let's give her a hand. Struggled to find one more time. But on a other note, we want to give our condolences and have a moment of silence for a couple of people. First of all, most of you know already Mr. Jim Kanzila, his wife Wendy, passed away last night at 9:30. So we want to remember that family. And then also today, Mike Boldig's brother just passed away. So we want to just have a moment of silence for these two that are that have passed away in honor of these families that are connected to the school.
Okay, we will go on with the COVID update.
Okay, so hot off the press, our numbers shared from Darlene today. We currently have 2 staff members, one at North and one at East, who have tested positive, and 2 students, both from the high schools. So 4 active cases. And then when you look at the numbers of temporary learners who are out on quarantine, we have a total of 56, which is up a few from last time, but I do know that we have 1 full class out, and so that elevates that number a bit. A bit of good news, last time I had talked to you about struggling with some learners who were disengaged when they're learning remotely. But our current system for truancy court and other methods, we have the high school admin working with the court system so that now these kids can be ordered, some of them, to appear in school on Fridays for mandatory help. So hopefully we can see a difference there. We're just really appreciative of our community partner support. And then next year, when we talk about scheduling, I had shared with you that DPI last week did confirm we can indeed offer remote learning if that's our wish. So we're entering talks with all staff members now, and then we'll follow up with a survey, of course. But I'm meeting first with high school staff on Friday via the computer, 2 separate times to accommodate them. We're just looking at feedback about which students, if not all, should be allowed the option of remote learning. Do we want certain courses and not others? There are so many things to discuss. And I met with Heather today, and then we'll follow up with the middle school next week. And I've spoken to elementary principals so far, and they are reaching out to their staff members, and I will as well. But right now, we're thinking that really we wouldn't need to offer it to 4K through 3. Most are in agreement that that experience is best done in person. So we have a lot of work to do to prepare for next year, and that's why we're ramping up now. So, and with that, we have a vaccination update, and I'll turn it over to Darlene. Do you want to come closer, or are you?
Pardon me, I'll stand.
Okay, so we can hear. Thank you.
So I've been in contact with public health quite a bit. I am cautiously optimistic that we'll be able to start vaccinating staff members in about 3 years. Right now, the problem that we're having is the demand far outweighs the supply that we've been told DHS has. A webinar that they were on, that public health was on yesterday, just said, they just kept repeating, we don't have the supply, we don't have the supply. But public health is now starting to order vaccines so they can start administering. They're the ones that are going to be administering to us. They're going to be our vaccinators. So I'm hoping they are now very slowly starting to roll out phase 1B, which is where the educators land. And right now they're targeting the law enforcement and EMS. But then I'm hoping the educators are moved up closer to the top. Last I heard, they were moving them up on the priority list. So like I say, I'm optimistic that we are going to start getting that vaccine into the arms of our staff. So to know what we're going to do, I think one of the issues that we have is that people are not fully understanding the pros and the cons. They're just not well educated in the vaccines. So with Julie and with Dr. McKenna's help, we're going to put a survey together, and I'm hoping we can get that out like soon this week. So we can ask the staff, are you considering or are you planning on taking the vaccine? If not, or if you're hesitant, or you're scared to, what is your concern, and what information do you need so you can make a well-informed decision whether you take it or not. We don't want to coerce, we don't want to sway, but we want everybody to be able to make a well-informed decision and feel good about making that decision. So we're hoping to get some good information. I'm going to meet with Dr. McKenna next week, if we can get that out this week, so I can meet with him next week. We'll put the answers and address all the concerns. And then we're going to put it out like the Q&A that you've done. We'll put it out district-wide as a Q&A. These are the concerns. This is the answer. We may not know the answer to all of them, and because we don't know all the answers to the vaccine, but we don't know all the answers to COVID either. All we can do is what the science is telling us right now and give that information out. So that's our goal. So I'm getting excited. Because I think when we get this vaccine out into the arms of our staff and available to the staff, I think we're going to see the stress level go way down. My goal is to see what we can do to get that stress level down. And I think it will just help everybody who's in the classrooms. And I told you before, there are frontline workers. They're in the classrooms, and if we can get them so they feel better about being here, they're so dedicated. But I think it'll bring their stress down. I think it's just going to make it easier for them as well. So I'm excited. So any questions about that? I mean, I will say I just heard on the news tonight, the CDC is now recommending they start rolling it out faster. Right now, the hang-up is in the DHS here in Wisconsin. But for a while, they were holding on to second dose. CDC is now recommending that second dose just get out. They'll have the second dose when the month is ready to, when you're ready to get it. But they're saying just get that first dose out to everybody that wants to take it. They are also going to, within 2 weeks, they're gonna start opening it up to anybody over 65 years of age and anybody who has pre-existing comorbidities. So CDC is really trying to ramp up the vaccination, so that kind of gave me a little hope as far as getting our teachers and all of the staff who wanted vaccinated as well.
Does it change so if the teacher has the vaccine, both doses we'll say, but one of the kids tests positive, so that staff member will be able to continue working, correct? They will not have to quarantine?
Unfortunately, at this point, all of our mitigation strategies will still have to be followed. We still have to mask, we still have to quarantine if they're exposed. Because one of the things we don't know is when, number one, when they think after about 10 days after the second dose, your body goes into overdrive and really starts kicking out the antibodies. But you don't know how long they last yet. That's kind of what phase 4 is all about in the trial. Is now they know what it does, but how long does it last? The phase 4 is going to take 2 years from everything I've read. So they're still going to want us to mask, distance the best we can. Everything we are doing now is what CDC and DHS is still recommending. But can the teachers feel more confident and better about being in the classroom? I think so.
What percentage of teachers did you get the feeling wouldn't want to take it? Was it a small percent or was it like 50 or 25 or?
You know, at this point, we haven't sent out that's what the survey is kind of all about as well, is to try to give us a baseline as to how many people are wanting it. But I will tell you, we have had a lot of questions. When is it going to be available? And I field those questions every day from a multitude of people in the district. So again, if we get 50%, I think we'll do better than 50%. And I think if we educate the staff so they don't feel so hesitant or scared about the unknown, just looking at the science, I think we're going to see a higher amount of people taking the vaccine.
And is somebody going to come to the schools to vaccinate staff?
Yes, we are going to set it up on a Friday because we have no students. It's going to be an all-day thing. What the plan is at this point is we're going to hold it at the Vaughan at the high school because you can space out there. When you get the vaccine, you still have to wait about 15 minutes to be observed, 15 minutes to 30 minutes. So you'll get the vaccine, you'll be asked to sit spaced out in the mall just to be monitored for that length of time. Public health is employed or is having AFD come in to monitor the paramedics. They're actually hiring the paramedics in the ambulance for the day to go and to monitor. I will be there to help monitor the screen or in whatever capacity I can help them with. But it's going to be on a Friday because the first vaccine, very few people notice side effects from it. It's the second vaccine that a lot of people tend to have a little bit more of a reaction to. So if we have it on a Friday, that gives them the weekend to rest and they're set to go on Monday.
Very
So
good.
that's the plan. But public health is all set. Once they get the go-ahead, we'll get it scheduled.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Is that what you guys are gonna do, Dr. Deep, at the hospital? If you get exposed, if you have both doses of the vaccine, you're still gonna have to quarantine even if you
For
have.
healthcare workers, it's a little different because you are masked, you are gowned, you have your full PPE. I wear an N95 and a face shield, or some people have that hood called a PAPR if the N95 doesn't fit them. So most of the times with that protection, you're not exposed until and unless you're symptomatic and get tested, then you still stay home for the 10 days. But otherwise, even if you do the vaccine, to get that herd immunity, you need in excess of 70%. Right now across the country, I think you're at 40 to 50% depending on which area you're looking at. So until you get that herd immunity, it's probably going to take until the end of the year or sometime next year, the vaccination rates are low. Plus you're not going to vaccinate the kids, which takes
Right.
a long time. Right now the vaccines, only one of the vaccine is indicated for 16 and older.
Okay. Anything else, Julie?
No, thank you.
Okay, we will go on to item number 3, annual auditor's report.
Andy, you've met Dave before. Dave has presented to the board, and he represents CLA, the accounting firm that is conducting the audit this year. And Dave will present the report.
So there's two parts of the report. One is the annual financial report. This is the bond document. This is your annual financial report. It represents all the financial statements of the district. It includes all the required statements. We have issued an unmodified opinion on the financial statements, meaning we would make no modifications. So the second document is the staple document inside. There we pull out all the key information. So we try to summarize what's important when we look at your financial statement. So the entire document is a complete document. What we try to do is kind of isolate when we look at your financial report, your operations, what's important. And we call it our executive summary and board communication. So it's really our communication to the board. If we turn to page 1, it's called the executive audit summary. It's just a high-level discussion of the financial statements. It indicates that, as I indicated, we indicated the financial statements are fairly stated. That is the best opinion you can receive on your financial statements. It means that the report that is contained in here of all the financial statements, we believe it accurately reflects the financial position and results of operations of the district. The second part is internal controls. We did have one internal control that we do report. It is the same one that we have reported. It's that we're helping with the financial statement. So this is the district's document. It comes directly from your financial records, but we assist in the preparation of the document. So we do report that just to the board to realize that it is your report, but we're assisting with that. We did not identify any deficiencies or non-compliance over federal and state awards. That's important. You receive a significant amount of federal and state awards to facilitate your programs as a school district. Our role as your auditor is to make sure that on selected programs, we do review various different programs of the district that you are following the appropriate controls. So we do not identify any compliance, either internal controls or compliance. The general fund, which is your general operating fund, is a significant component of the operation. So what we always like to do is look at your general fund, and your general fund did experience an increase of about 1.4 million, as indicated, and you currently have an ending fund balance of about $6,853,000. So like all school districts, we did see increasing fund balance in the past year. A lot of that has been used up in various different activities in the current year, preparing for COVID as you got into the current year. So overall, from a financial perspective, when you look at your general fund, you continue to be in a very sound position as you enter the budget year that you're in right now. Then if we turn, starting on page 2, we are required to make formal communications to the board. So as part of our audit, we are required to talk through the fact that your audit includes federal and state awards, as I indicated. The federal guidance is what we call uniform guidance. The state is issued state single audit guidelines. So as I indicated, those are the compliance items that we review against, and as I indicated, the board or the district did comply with all those requirements. From an aspect of accounting policies and accounting estimates, there are some estimates embedded in the financial statements. So whether how long certain lives are going to last, your post-employment benefits, the Wisconsin retirement system. Those are all estimates, so, you know, as estimates, that could be, or that could vary. But from our perspective, we do review all the estimates. We believe they're fair and appropriate. Then if we turn to page 3, financial statement disclosures, we do not believe any disclosures contained in your financial report are particularly sensitive. What that means is something that could have a material impact on a user of your financial report. So we believe all the disclosures are pretty clear, consistent, and nothing unusual within the disclosures. The rest of page 3 and page 4 would indicate if that we had any issues of concern, any uncorrected misstatements, any, you know, and if you go through these items, we did not have any concerns. All our adjustments were posted. None of the adjustments were significant, which is important. That means that the financial records that the district board does receive on on a monthly basis are accurate, and our adjustment did not identify any significant deficiencies within that. Then, it talks on pages 4 and 5 that there's other documents that are contained within this within the annual financial report. Once again, much of the document is as required by the Department of Public Instruction in Wisconsin, some of the communications, and also the budget to actual comparison. So you're basically complying with the requirements of the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. Page 6 and 7 really go through internal control. We already talked about on page 7 the one item that we call a significant deficiency but not a material weakness. It just relates to us preparing the financial report. And our firm audits over 100 school districts in Wisconsin, and we prepare the financial report for probably 95% of them. So, maybe you're Kenosha's or Green Bay's, but the majority of them we're preparing the report, and that's in those reports. So, any questions on that? So very clean audit. Certainly, one of the things I would like to point out is obviously this year with COVID, everything was a little different. So a lot of it really relied on communication, electronic communication, phone calls, etc. And really working through the audit in the best way from an efficiency, but also from a health aspect of how we approached it. So the district was worked very well with us in getting us all the information that we needed as we went through it going forward. So, any questions on that? Okay, then. The rest of the report is kind of the financial information that is really summarized out of the annual financial report. So if you look at page 9, we already talked that the general fund went up about 1.4 million. You can see, now when we talk general fund, just so to be clear, it also includes Fund 27, which is your special education fund. Fund 27 is funded primarily by a transfer from the general fund. So when you do your financial reporting, it is in essence a general fund reporting entity. DPI breaks it out from a budgetary perspective, so they can manage special education expenses on a separate cost center. But from a perspective, there's no GAAP basis reason that it had to be separated. And since it's funded by a transfer, it is reported as part of your general fund. So if you're looking at those expenses and revenues and say, those look higher than our Fund 10 budget, that's because they also include Fund 27. Then you can see the other funds are your debt service or long-term capital projects and various other small community service, food service. Overall, if you look at the increase, it's primarily your general fund is your largest fund and it's most significant, and it accounts for the majority of the increase in your overall fund balances. But when you look at all your fund balances within the district, nothing from our perspective is a concern as we look at your fund balances. Any questions on that? Okay, then if we turn to page 10, page 10 really looks at your general fund balance. So when we look at fund balance in your governmental funds, it's really a sense of your liquidity. It's a sense of the ability to finance your expenditures. We did talk before that your general fund went up by about 1.4 million. You can see a historical trend over the last couple of years. Your unassigned currently represents about 4.5 million, so most of that increase really resides in the unassigned fund balance, and that's the blue component. So you can see your fund balance has kind of stayed a little stable, dropped a little bit in 2019 and increased in 2020. So, no real significant concerns when I look at your general fund. Usually what you see is kind of a consistent. So, like I said, 2020 you did have a slight increase in your fund balance in relationship to the other years. Bottom of page 10 is really your food service, and there you can see your food service started 5 years ago with about 130,000, and so you now have about 735,000. So you have had increases in food service. Those funds have to be spent within the food service area, so you have some additional expenses within that. And then page 11 looks at the community service fund, and that has about 87,000, almost 88,000, very comparable to the prior year. So, any questions on that?
2 questions, Dave.
Yep.
The 2020, I see restricted there for 46,000. What? I don't see restricted in all the years prior to.
There was a portion of your common school fund that hadn't been expended by the end of the year, so it's restricted for that going forward. So. But yeah, that's, that was probably because of COVID and, not spending some of those funds, but.
Was that the Noboken?
No, it's the Common School Library Fund.
Yeah.
Oh, okay,
So,
I got you.
those are
Thank you.
categorical aid for strictly
Yeah.
the library.
Okay. And then the community service fund, that's the Fund 80,
Correct.
the pool fund.
Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? Then page 12 kind of looks at your general fund and kind of says, okay, from a revenue perspective, what's our primary sources of funding? You can see the state is providing about 66% of the cost, while property taxes account for 26. So those two, local and state, do account for about 94%. The other portions are federal and some other smaller sources. How you spend yours is the general fund appropriations is on the bottom. 52% is instruction, which is both special education and general instruction at the high school and elementary schools. And then there's various different program services, business support services, pupil services, etc. that is part of the annual budget that you do adopt. And then page 13 goes through your debt service. Your long-term obligations. The district has very low debt obligations, and you're down to about $1,140,000 of general obligation debt going forward. And then Appendix B is just a technical update. Really talks about leases that will be effective in future years, a requirement to report leases in a slightly different manner, so it's not effective yet. GAS, because of COVID, delayed the implementation of some of these documents and some of these standards, so they did give another year for governments to implement many of the standards that you have to implement. And, obviously, when you look through it, there is no other comments or observations as part of our audit. That really indicates from our perspective, we feel the district has a strong internal control structure. We do work through various different issues as part of the audit. None of those were significant. What we try to do is talk about controls and add our experience, but nothing of any magnitude that we believe is significant to the district overall. It's always an opportunity to use our knowledge or use our experience in school districts to provide benefits to the district. So with that, I'll entertain any questions anyone may have.
Silence is death.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave.
Okay, we will go on to new business then. And item A is board member meetings and legislative reports. Anybody have anything there you want to report on? And then we'll go on to item B, review of proposed 2021 resolutions. And Mike, you have the floor.
Well, thank you, Andy. Yeah, you should have all received the email, and thank you, Mary Kay, for sending those out. There are 10 resolutions that are being brought forth at convention this year, and as you know, convention will be virtual. I will be participating from my desk at home, and hopefully everything will go well. I've gone through the resolutions on my own, and for the most part, what I'm seeing are 10 resolutions that all make a good semblance of sense. Some of these are repeats from years past in particular, and we always have to, I think, put it into perspective that the resolutions are recommendations to our lobbyists to take to the state legislature. So these are not laws, these are not demands, these are suggestions so that we can get our points of view to the legislature so they can understand where the School Board Association is looking at things. Out of all of 10, my only question to the board, and this is my personal side of it, the resolution, the very first resolution, which is a 1-cent sales tax for school infrastructure, technology, and tax relief. There is already a policy on the books for this. It's our policy 2.04. But it's very, policy 2.04 is very broad and does not specifically indicate a specific addition to the sales tax to specifically fund schools. So what my question to the board is this: do you as a group feel that this is something that this board wants to support and that I should vote yes in favor of it? So I put it out to you guys and ladies.
So my opinion on this is yes. The whole funding mechanism isn't exactly fair, and while I'm not sure that the legislature would go with this 1% thing, I think it's important for us to do something to make them look at it. We had a discussion on this at CISA, and somebody said, well, if districts want more money, they can pass a referendum. And the person who was speaking in their district, if they pass a referendum that raises the mill rate $1,000, they get 2.4 million, I think, and here we get 1.2 or something for the same dollar, something like that. So we only get half as much for our taxes going up. So the only question that came up about this was that 1 cent, is it all going into a pool and then getting distributed? Or is it coming back to your county for the amount you pay?
That was my concern too. I would want more clarification before I would decide whether or not to support it.
Yeah, because in that second paragraph, it just says distributed on a per student basis, and
Right.
we don't know where that's going to.
I don't like that language.
So my feeling is no.
Yeah.
I don't want to see this.
Yeah, just the way it's written, I would say no.
Right. Is that the majority opinion of the board?
I say no.
Yeah. We can vote on these if,
I believe they want to raise a statewide 1% sales tax to help fund schools, correct?
1 cent.
1%,
1 cent, yeah, 1 cent sales tax.
Yeah.
Now 1%. Well, the way the resolution is worded, it says the WASB supports the implementation of a new statewide 1 cent, and in parentheses 1%, sales tax to help public school districts build, maintain, and upgrade facilities, upgrade district technology infrastructure, software, and teacher training related to technology, and help lower property taxes for Wisconsin taxpayers. District electors would need to approve a one-time revenue purpose statement before these sales tax funds could be expended, and funding from the sales tax could not be spent on supplies, hiring additional staff, or employee salaries and benefits. So, looks like the way they've worded the resolution is very specific as to what it's supposed to go for.
And it may replace some property tax, but not all.
Exactly.
Well, I think it's a lot more fair than just, for example, you mentioned a referendum. We haven't passed a referendum in Antigo as far as I can remember. The entire state is going to be kicking in. My gut feeling is to go with it. Schools are broke. And again, I'm going to go back several years to Act 10 to cut $800 million from K-12 public education. We're short, and I think a 1% sales tax is that's acceptable to me. And it says, I read this too, it said that tourists coming through are going to help pay for that. Anything they buy is going to kick in towards it. I think a sales tax is a very fair tax. Nobody likes paying taxes, I know I don't, but somebody's got to pay for this stuff.
You are able to amend it when it's brought to,
I would imagine there will be amendments brought forward, yes.
I would be in support of it if there was some form of an amendment that is able to more clearly define what the equitable, how equitable is defined in this, how they phrase it. I just have a concern how evenly it's going to be distributed, because a community like ours definitely needs this more than other areas.
Yeah.
Our community is what this is designed for. I want to make sure our community receives its fair share.
I agree with that.
Yeah, so at this point, I would say no, but if we are able to clearly define those roles and that verbiage, I would be in support of it.
Okay. I will make that vote.
Mike, if you want us to vote on this, we can, but some of the comments here are contingent on like Jim's
Exactly, so
comments.
I
He's
think-
kind of voting yes or no, depending.
Yeah.
Based on what I'm hearing, if the motion is left unamended, our position would be, majority position would be that we would not be in favor of it. But if there was an amendment that indicated, or there was a clear definition of how evenly the funds would be expended, then we as a board would be in favor.
Is everybody okay with that?
Well, these are just recommendations too to legislators. so-
Right. Once again, yes, you bring up a very good point, Danny. These are just, there are policies, there are recommendations to the legislature. So what we may say here may not necessarily end up that way.
And I'm just gonna say at this point that we're kind of giving our input to Mike, but when he goes there and there's the discussion on the floor and he hears something that thinks, and he thinks, wait, they've changed it all around, well, then he's gonna vote however he thinks he should vote.
But I want the board's opinion because I think it's my job to represent this group at convention and express your feelings.
Yeah.
So, we're good there, okay. There's one about broadband access. Oh, I'm sorry,
Oh,
Gene.
can I just say, it's just weird to think on a per student basis it's gonna be distributed. So that's the same way our property taxes are distributed, right? We get a certain amount per student. So it's certainly not doing what Jim is saying. He'd want us to get twice our weight in students or something for low poverty districts. You know, so then we'd be sucking money from the rest of the state instead of getting our proportional amount. You know, and so it's a different, it'd be interesting if somebody tries to make that amendment, or if you ask Mike to make that amendment, you know, that's just an interesting.
I guarantee it wouldn't be supported, but
No.
the way that this is being presented is, that's, I'd imagine how they would want to have it presented, but yeah, just the way it's written. I don't know.
Yeah, you would
You
like.
guys know how I feel.
Yeah.
And I'm what you said.
Well, anyway, so I've got my clarification on that. Resolution number 2 for broadband access, I didn't see any problem with that whatsoever because I think that's an issue that this state has been sorely lacking on for a number of years, and better broadband access our district and districts across the state have the more it's going to benefit education. So I didn't see that as an issue. The enrollment hold harmless, didn't see that as being an issue. The next one, Resolution 2104, regarding instruction on indigenous tribes. Back in 1989, Wisconsin Act 31 was put into place to require public school districts to provide instruction on the history, culture, and tribal sovereignty of the 11 federally recognized American Indian Nations tribal communities in Wisconsin. My feeling on this was, and I was kind of ambivalent, because what I'm seeing is we already have a law in place that tells us what to do. The problem I had with this is, in discussion earlier that I had with Andy, I think has kind of given me a little more clarification on it. My point was that you're now asking for more. The current law doesn't have anything about data collection, tracking the compliance, evaluation of the efficacy of the act, all the good measurements and stuff. And my point was going to be that, is this going to put additional burdens on districts for data gathering? Or, as to the point that Andy made for me, are we already collecting the data and we just don't have it organized in a single place? So I think that's my concern, is if we're going to put an additional burden on the district to produce data or something, is that a good thing? When we've already got a law in place that says, here's what you're supposed to be doing. But unfortunately, the legislature, in their infinite wisdom, didn't put any monitoring to it. So what does the board feel about that?
I would have to ask, are we gathering any of the data that would pertain to that? And how difficult would it be, if we're not, how difficult would it be to gather?
Well, in my tenure here, I have not been part of collecting that data for Act 31. However, I was in WASA. And when I read the end of this, further efforts to provide resources and professional development opportunities and other initiatives aimed at helping districts. So it sounds fairly harmless, like it wouldn't be taxing on us, it would be helpful. But I'm a bit skeptical, because like you said, Mike, if it's already there and districts just aren't doing their part, then I'm not sure what the intent is, but on the surface it seems a good idea.
Yeah, and this is one I think that has come up before, and when I was looking through my data and stuff and realizing that your former district was the one that has put forth the resolution, and knowing how their board is structured and stuff, I understand it. But I think it's one that I'm going to spend a little time listening to, and if I hear the commentary about the data collection, that it's going to be fairly clean, fairly innocuous, with not too much of a burden on a district, I would be willing to vote in favor of it. But if I hear an inclination where it's going to be a lot more data gathering and paperwork and stuff that's going to put additional constraints and time constraints on district administration to produce the data, I would not support it. I think most of us would agree that our districts in general are fairly stretched out already to pretty lean conditions, and that to add additional paperwork to somebody's already full platter wouldn't be conducive to good operation of the district. So, great, I will take that one and give that some additional listening to. Number 5 was special education flexibility to address emergencies. I didn't see any flaws in that whatsoever. That I see that we can support very easily. The assessment and report card waivers, looks to me like that's based on our current situation with the COVID, and that is just basically allowing a little bit of a waiver that because of the way things are going, that we're not necessarily going to use the report card data for a bit because it's gonna be terribly, terribly skewed. And I think that's probably a good thing. 21.7, rehiring retired teachers and staff. I'm gonna just say hell yes. We're at a standpoint, I realize why the initial impetus was back when this first started, was that there was a lot of complaining, and because this one has been discussed at General Assembly before, about teachers coming back after retirement, and that some would consider that to be double dipping. I don't think so anymore. I really think that we're at a standpoint where, as was brought up before about Act 10, and enough teachers have been driven away from the profession that if we want to teach the kids and have good quality educators, yes, it makes sense to hire some of them back and make it basically a second career for them. They may not be teaching the same subject they were the first time, but they've got that classroom knowledge, they've got that tribal knowledge of knowing what to do and to help the kids. And if they're willing to come back and do it, I can't see this organization not supporting it. So I'm gung-ho on that one. Superintendent evaluations. After reading through this, I completely agreed with what the resolution is. I think there's, just the way it's worded, it makes complete and total sense to me, and I don't see it being an issue whatsoever. Comprehensive school safety legislation. It's, that is just a matter of taking an existing resolution that's in our books already, 6.115, and rewriting it to meet the current standards that we're going up against. It's well written, it's timely, and I think it deserves our consideration to go through. The very last one, 2110, school district mascots, logos, and imagery. I'm ambivalent about this one only because I think we've flogged that horse to death, so to speak, and I don't think I personally would be in favor of it, only because I think the decision for what your district is doing should be left up to the individual districts and not put out by a mandate by the organization saying you have to do this. I think individual districts know their areas better than the rest of us, and that just to change a school name or a mascot to appease a bigger issue when it's really not a problem in the local area is not something that I think we should get in the middle of. So,
I would just take the other side of that, Mike, that if mascots are offensive to people, that I think they should be removed. Now, on the other hand, it is a fine line, and I'll take Mishicot, for example. Mishicot is named after Chief Mishicot, and so that's a sign of respect, I would say, to name your city or school district after somebody. Other things, though, might be offensive.
Oh,
So
absolutely, absolutely, I can
It's,
see that.
but to say it's just, you can do whatever you want in your area, if it's something offensive, it's offensive and it's racist.
I will make that point. Because the way I looked at it too was, you've got a group that will maybe not like this, and then all of a sudden, I'll use the team in Green Bay as an example. They're the Packers. We know what the history of the meatpacking industry was. What if all of a sudden, if somebody got offended because you called them the Packers? It's kind of a generic term, it really doesn't, but somebody's going to complain about it. So I think that part of it is, to me, is where you bring up a good point, Andy, if it's offensive, but if it's offensive to what degree? Is it offensive to a larger majority, or is it offensive to a rather minute?
That's where this resolution was there last year in some form,
It's been there several years.
and that's where it That's where the hard part comes.
Mhm.
I think there's some things that are probably offensive to everybody, and then, but where you draw the line is the hard part.
Well, I'll have to figure that out.
Okay. Anybody got any further comments on resolutions?
So if the resolution passed, is it there forever? Is it official resolution until we change it?
The resolution, once it passes,
Into
it
the
becomes
book?
part of that book.
Okay.
And it stays on there until somebody decides to change it, amend it. And if you look through this, and I'd be more than happy to let you do that, JD. Because, well, here, we'll just look at this one. Chapter 6, Safe Schools and Healthy Students. Policy 6.06 originally was brought up in 2012 and was amended in 2014. So
So I can change this motion just to lower the drinking age to 18 from 21. 6.03.
you can try.
I'm gonna be the representative someday before I get off this board and vote for that one.
Well, put it this way. You better have the support of the Policy and Resolution Committee because that's where you have to start all out. So it's got to work its way through a group of
It's a
people.
process.
It is a process. It's not just a matter of submitting a resolution and having it immediately go forward.
They won't just let it
No.
send them out to everybody?
I speak from experience because my first 2 years on the board, I was a member of the Policy and Resolution Committee and helped hammer out a much larger quantity than this. I think the first year I was on, there were 21 that made it to the floor, and I think the second year there was probably 16 or 17.
Yeah.
So this is a pretty light year. But I will take the board's guidance and report back to you after convention, and let you know how it all transpired.
Okay.
Thank you.
We will go on to item C, staff and student engagement survey discussion.
Okay, as you know, we had said we'd revisit a staff engagement survey this winter instead of embarking on one this fall when things were so chaotic in planning for COVID. So what I have for you tonight is a plan moving forward. I'm interested in your thoughts on it. There are actually 3 surveys I'd like to talk to you about that cover all of the components we talked about. The first is a district family engagement survey that we've given before. And as you know, Heather McCann leads our district PBIS team. And in meeting with them, they had a significant discussion about should we be sending it this spring because of COVID and this unusual school year. And their answer was yes. They really want to reach out to all families. And so I have a copy of the survey here. What we've done in the past is shared those results with the board, and we would again. So it would ask, you know, the basic, like which building and do your children attend, the grades, things like are you aware of the academic expectations? Because as we try to grow student achievement, we really need that partnership with families. The time that you feel comfortable supporting your child's academic progress at home, so making those homeschool connections. So this one you're familiar with, and I just wanted you to know it is our plan to send that again this spring. The next one you are also familiar with, and it's the Educator Effectiveness Survey. So because we use the Frontline Educator Effectiveness System for all evaluations of certified staff, we have that component offered to us of this survey that goes with it, and then the results are tabulated if you reach a certain percentage of completion. However, this past year, when I brought the results to you just a few months ago, everyone received results because of the year we were having. You didn't have to have a threshold of response. And if you recall, that's the survey that talked a lot about trust and those indicators, and we as a staff weren't satisfied with our scores. And that's one of the measures that led us to put down a school conditions goal, the 3 that we shared with you in draft form that the staff now finalized at our last professional development meeting. One of those is school conditions, where the nucleus of that goal is trust. Trust between, you know, staff to staff, staff to principal, staff to central office, and it is all reciprocal. So that, we're knee deep in that, because we heard each other and we heard our staff, and the whole district wants to improve on that measure. So that one will be happening again this spring as well. The last one I want to tell you about is new, and it would be my recommendation that it replace the school perception survey, and here's why. We are involved, as you know, in the RPIC grant, and as part of that grant requirement, we have to administer this survey from the University of Chicago. It's called the 5 Essentials Survey, and there's one for all staff and one for students, which we haven't done before, at least not in my tenure. So when I look at these, it's really interesting to me how it's correlated in what we're looking at. Like the board has talked again about informally having teachers be offered feedback, getting ideas from other staff members. Again, it goes into the trust. In fact, one of the questions says, to what extent do you feel respected by your principal? That is so well aligned with what the Educator Effectiveness Survey is asking, that we feel really strongly that it'll help us triangulate our data and get exactly to what we're looking at, or looking for. So those are the 3 surveys. I think if we pursue in that order, and the Chicago one would be next year, and that's based on the grant. So we'd have 2 this spring, and then that big one essentially next year. So, and of course the board would receive results on all of those, and plus we would save money. So that would be my recommendation.
How much is the Chicago one? Is that something we can repeat every year after the grant, or will they
That
only do
is a great question, and I asked it if there were a cost with it, and I don't think there is, because it's a part of the, I'm looking at Heidi, part of the grant requirement.
Right, but what about when the grant is done?
Done.
What year is the grant end? What's that?
Yeah, we can check into that, especially because it will provide us a baseline, and then we want to see, you're right, JD, if we improve.
If
That's
it's
what
not
the
that
board-
much money, would you be tempted to do it this year too?
We checked into that actually, because in some phases of the grant we're right on track, and some were a little ahead of the game. And April, our internal coach, did ask about that, and the grant coordinator said no, we had to wait, so,
They pushed some of the requirements to next year.
yeah.
That was one of them, was supposed to be this spring, but now they're moving
When was the last time we did the school perceptions one? We never quite picked the questions, did we? That was gonna be the hard part, so, or was there
We
one?
did pick questions when we did the referendum. I can't even remember, we did a staff one. Did we?
I think it was, Tim, I think you shared with me, it was 2015.
And that was a referendum survey, correct? Or was it a staff survey?
Most of it was related to the referendum. You know, how much would taxpayers be willing, what kind of options would they be interested in, that kind of stuff.
So that was more of a community survey. And that would be a different topic.
Because I'd say we'd be more tempted to do school perceptions this year, just so we'd have the data set. If we were gonna do it every year, if we can't do the Chicago one every
Afterwards.
year. Yeah.
And I don't know why we wouldn't be able to, just may cost.
Right. And if it's $100,000 or something ridiculous,
Right.
First year free, but
So what I like about the plan, you know, it's our families, our staff, twice actually, in different methods. And for the first time, we could explore student voice.
yeah, that's,
And that's really,
what kind of things do they ask the students? Yeah, that-
so they asked them to consider a class. So everyone would be talking like about their 3rd-hour class, so that they get data across the board. And then they would rate to what extent you agree or disagree with the following. Teachers are continually learning and seeking new ideas. I look forward to working hard each day at this school. Are there physical conflicts among students? Disorder in classrooms? Principal has confidence in the expertise of the teachers, you know, so really gets at some of the same strands.
Are we going to vote on going forward with that at the monthly meeting, or we just?
If you would like to, otherwise if there's no objection, we'll just put these in place. Or if you'd like me to bring it back for a formal approval, I can.
Well, there's no finances involved with it.
Right.
Then we don't have to vote.
Okay. All right, then we'll just bring you the results when we have them.
Okay.
Do let us know about the Chicago one, what they say though, at the end of the month.
If
You
there's,
know, if they'll let us do it in the future.
okay.
Well, I think that's a good point, JD, because you would like to repeat these year after year, really, or at least on a regular basis. Okay, we'll go on to open enrollment special education seats for 2021, 2022. Heidi.
I didn't know if they saw it, any more questions, but it should be in there.
Anyone have questions for Heidi?
No, it follows pretty much where we've been over the past several years as far as available seats. And yeah, it's, the only way you make more seats is if you have more instructors, and that's not gonna happen right now.
Part of it is keeping it in balance with the declining enrollment of our regular ed as well. So we don't want, you know, I'm hoping that at some point we get more students back, we can take more students with IEPs in as well to keep it.
Okay. The next item is item E, AHS Choir 2020 Spring Trip Reimbursement.
Well, first I want to let you know that Jacob Oxley wanted to be here tonight, but he was unable to attend the meeting. And then secondly, particularly to a couple of board members, as well as the parents and students, this has been delayed. It's unacceptable how long it's taken us to get to this point. And we should have addressed this earlier. But this is a proposal that I vetted through both DPI and through Dave Mako, our auditor. So essentially, the choir group entered into contract with 2 agencies for a total of $66,475,000. So, they essentially, there's 2 arms. There's a travel agency, which is Artist Travel Consultants, ATC, and Distinguished Concerts International New York, which is essentially an organization that provides professional voice trainers, sound folks. They're actually securing a venue, practice facilities, all that kind of thing for the students to perform. And when the trip got canceled in March, this sat on the back burner, and then over the summer, I had conversations with Mr. Oxley, and then we had to start school, and on and on and on, and it's late. But essentially, I've broken down the costs of the trip. I've broken down the fundraising. And then I talk about reimbursement. So to get money back from these 2 companies after it's been canceled, we had to sign an agreement. And they gave us 15% of the cost back. And that's what you see under ATC refund and BCINY refund. And then the final payment, the choir group had solicited to make the final payment just prior to canceling the trip. So the numbers don't completely tie out because some folks didn't make their final payment, some people paid. So you understand on the next outstanding obligations, we talk about what's due to the participants. We had the Sheldon Trust had donated $20,000 towards this trip. And I talked to Mike Sheldon, and Mike really thought that he would have liked to have seen it equitable between the students and the participants and the Sheldon Trust. And I understand that, so I am suggesting we look at that as a priority to reimburse the trust. And that money would sit with the district, but then rather than go directly to the trust to request for some event, we would allow whoever would normally go to the trust for a fundraiser, maybe come to the district and get the Sheldon approval for that expenditure. So the last one there is due to the district. The way student activity funds work, whenever there's an expenditure, typically with a club, if they're going to purchase something, maybe they're going to pay for uniforms or they're going to go on a trip, when it starts getting over $500, we like to get the district office involved. We would handle the W-9s if those would be appropriate. We'd issue the 1099s at the end of the school year. On a larger purchase, we want to track that asset. So that activity comes through the district office. We make the payment, we secure the purchase order, that kind of thing. And then we just send an invoice over to the athletic and activities department, and they use their checkbook and they write us a check to reimburse us. So the final, we had made that $12,275 intermediate payment, and we did not receive reimbursement from the student activity account. So what I'm recommending is our first priority is to get everybody reimbursed. And knowing that we are not going to collect all the money, but we have enough money right now to reimburse out-of-pocket costs 100% of those that we're planning on traveling. And I'm recommending we do that. We know that they gave us a $3,500 airfare travel voucher, which we will not be able to use. It's good for the 2021 school year. I think it goes actually till the end of the year. But we aren't going to be traveling airfare for $3,500 in the next 9 months. I don't think. And then there's a penalty for a processing fee. And I called DCINY this morning and just asked them how they're doing on their obligations. They do not have a single booking for the 2021 school year. And they are now looking at bookings for the 21-22 school year. So they will not have had any money for at least 18 months. So I'm not holding out a significant amount of hope that we're going to get a whole lot more than what we have had. Now, when I talked to both DPI and to Dave, we talked about the reasonableness of this proposal. And because of COVID, we received additional emergency aid from the CARES Act through the state. We had cost savings measures that we took last year. This to me seems like a pretty reasonable approach. So I'm suggesting we, number one, pay the participants. Number two, reimburse the trust. That money would be held at the district, on the district books. And then finally, the last obligation would be due to the district. And it's likely that we'll just write that loss off. Any questions, any comments?
You wouldn't take that loss to the district out of CARES money? Because it is a result of CARE, or the pandemic.
Andy, I'd have to review the qualifications, and I would probably have to talk to grant guidance. But I don't, there's 4 or 5 categories within the grant. I don't know that we could figure out a way to make that work.
Okay.
One is a response to COVID, so it's things like additional nursing care, additional sanitization. One has to do with long-term closure of a building. I would, and one is remote technology. I would have to really review that and see if I could. And I would certainly, I can certainly consult with DPI to do that.
Okay, but your thought right now is
It probably
no.
wouldn't qualify the eligible cost.
Tim, is it fairly normal for organizations such as ATC and DCINY that you would only get 15% refund? Is that fairly typical, or has it been exacerbated by the fact that they're not able to book these trips and
Their
stuff?
position is, they really want to do right if they can. But they offer travel insurance as an option, and I believe that's quite a premium to buy the insurance. And I think the original contract was no refunds. If a student elects not to travel and decides at the last minute not to travel, there's no refund made to that student. But because the whole district couldn't travel. And, they're an organization where I think DCINY has probably 40 or 50 professional musicians and professionals in the business on the payroll, and ATC has 10 people on the payroll. So I would imagine they've got quite a log of people that are school districts that are looking for reimbursement.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you.
So
These people had made an offer last April or May sometime, that if we took, at that time they were willing to offer 50%, or if you waited until the end of this school year, they were going to refund the entire amount.
we signed that offer.
But they haven't given us
So,
50%.
so the language in the offer is they would try to fulfill 100% of the amount due less the processing fee. When I spoke to them today, I was just surprised to see somebody actually answer the phone. But that's what the agreement says. So I'm saying if we get additional funds, we'll replenish the trust, and if we get the whole thing, we should be able to reimburse it, everyone. So what I'd like the board to do is to think about it, and I will ask for your approval of the proposal at the board meeting. And then we would, if approved, we would cut checks and that the balance of the week. Questions?
Yeah, questions, comments?
I do have questions, however, I have to recuse myself from this because my son is a participant in this trip, so I can't say anything.
You can't ask questions?
No, not at the board level. I can ask him personally, but not at the board level. I'm sorry.
And maybe it would be good if you asked him
Sure.
those questions. But yeah. you're correct.
So I guess as a follow-up, and maybe this will arise, I'm suggesting that the $9,637 in fundraising would be the last priority of reimbursement. So those fundraising efforts, if we collect 100%, the band or the choir activity account would be reimbursed. But if we don't get 100%, they would not be reimbursed. They'd be starting over from scratch.
Tim, do you know if those fundraising efforts were, sometimes I know they do fundraising and say if you sell so X number of pies, then you only have to pay so much.
Yeah, there were nights of Culvers, there were all sorts of different.
Yeah.
Yes.
So there were all types of things, because some fundraisers are kind of, we're just throwing it all in the pot kind of thing.
It appeared to me that the records that I reviewed included both. So there were individual sales where they had to sell X, Y, Z, and depending on the sales level determined their credit on fundraising. And then they did nights like Culvers, for example, and those were distributed evenly across all students. So
at least, maybe you said this, you expect the parents to get all their money back.
Pardon?
You expect the parents to get all their money back for what they paid?
Not right now.
Not
You
right
mean
now.
the parent portion or the student portion? Because there were some chaperones.
So what I'm suggesting in my, use what we have in the student activity account to reimburse participants. And because the final payment was voided, and I'll be just honest, the actual individual account amount is, I'm not 100% certain that is exactly accurate. And I would work here is our records of receipt, and I would work individually with the parents and the students. And if they had records that indicated that our numbers were inaccurate, we would reimburse the students and the parents to whatever we feel is legitimate and accurate.
But to Dr. Deep's point, the people who were chaperones and had paid in, they're gonna get reimbursed too?
Yes. Yep.
So really the only thing where people are out is they put some work into fundraising either individually or, yeah.
And like I said, the district is on the hook for the balance.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. And I think we kind of have to reimburse people or nobody's ever gonna go on a trip again.
You know, and I guess I would ask Dr. Deep and Mr. Pyatt, if the rest of the Booster Club has questions, I would be absolutely happy to address them between now and the time of the board of what I'm thinking.
Okay. Then we will go on to item F, school office devices quote.
Yep, that's mine. The secretaries is what we're talking about here. It's been a while since their workstations were updated. So it's basically ran through all of them. And they had a choice whether they wanted to stay with the desktop model or to work with a laptop. So we gave them the choice, and off that choice is where I came up with this total and the bids. So I'm here for you to answer any questions if you need.
I was curious about Camera Corner and their CCCP is Camera Corner, I'm assuming.
Right.
We've worked with them in the past, and just their offer on the RAM is ridiculous. Well, do you know what their reasoning was behind that?
No, I do not discuss any of that until after the bids are done. They'll ask me some
Gold-plated or
questions.
something, or?
I'm not so sure, but they've hardly ever been really the lowest bid. There's some things that they've got a little bit on. They're a smaller company than CDW and some of the other ones, so I think it's a little bit harder for them.
Sure. Okay. I was just curious.
So it's not like they're giving 16 gigabytes and everybody else is only giving 8?
Yeah. I mean, the usual configuration is 8 gigabyte RAM. And because of the secretaries using them every day and pretty heavy users, we wanted a little bit beefier machine, and that's what we asked for the 16. So you can see the laptops, some of them configured to 16 right here.
Oh, but none of them are 16. Are they?
That's why they're getting the extra.
The laptops from CDW and MTS.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see. I read
Not
through
the desktops.
I get it. Yeah, I definitely want 16 too. You leave all your tabs open that way. It's like you're not in your desk.
This will come back, Mark, in 2 weeks then for the vote?
Yes, just basically wanted you guys to be aware of what was going on, and if there's any questions.
Makes sense for the secretaries to have good, viable equipment because they help keep the buildings running. So you want them to have good equipment to do that, so just makes sense.
Are they going to need more onboard storage than 256?
Well, the SSD is a lot more storage than what you're used to with a regular hard drive.
Okay.
Okay, the number may be smaller, but it actually holds more than your 512 gig regular old hard solid state drives are a lot faster and a lot more space.
Really? So an 8 gig, it's different.
Well, on the
It's
hard
a-
drive side,
right.
RAM, that's the same as it always been.
So, but on the hard
On the
drive side,
sides, yes.
so a terabyte of a solid state versus a terabyte of a normal drive is actually not a terabyte. So why do they still call it that and not call it
I
they
think
want it whole?
to cause less confusion.
Just to sell the product to you.
That's really weird.
It's called marketing.
It's marketing.
Okay.
And there's very little storage
I
left.
call it like lion or
You know,
something.
between the Google
I
Drive
never heard
and
that
our
before.
server drives, most
Sure.
of the files are kept there.
Okay.
Basically, it's operating system and the hardware software that we install.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions for Mark?
Nope. Bring her back at the end of the month.
Yeah, we'll see you in a couple weeks, or at least the.
Thanks, Mark.
And then we're going on to possible action items, consideration to approve the 2021 semester graduates.
I move the board approve the following 2020-2021 semester graduates, Nina Nelson and Emma Prasalowitz.
Seconded.
Any questions or comments?
Were these just omitted from the previous list?
Inadvertently.
Inadvertently omitted? I'm sorry, that's what I should say. Thanks, Mary.
I knew that word.
Good.
Okay, any other questions? Then all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we will go on to confirm the next meeting as being Tuesday, February 9th at 6 p.m. here. And then the next item is closed session, but Julie has sent out an email that pretty well covered everything that happened at the hearing, and so there's no need to go into closed session.
Excellent. So that being the case, sir, are you looking for a motion to adjourn?
Almost.
Okay.
I just want to mention that Mary Kay has sent out an email asking you to respond to the survey. And thank you to the 2 people who have, and for the rest of us. We got 2 weeks to get it done. Or at least I would like it if everybody got it done in 2 weeks. So,
We can use the quote for June 30th.
you can, yeah.
Never mind.
Not if I turn it off.
Okay. And with that,
2 weeks, right? 2 weeks?
with that, we're ready.
Motion to adjourn?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay,